4.9 million, not illegals, but foreign kids, because the cost of living is too expensive. Spiritual person. What? That failure is endangering all of America. It's a series of intertwining stories. I had on Ezra Levant yesterday, and we talked about all things Canadian, and it was a great episode. He dropped a stat that there are 4.9 million, not illegals, but foreigners on foreign visas in Canada, which, if you don't know what the population of Canada is, represents more than 10% of the population by a fair, but it's almost 10% of the Canadian population are foreigners on visas that are apparently set to expire in the next 1 to 3 years. And the spoiler alert is they ain't all going back voluntarily. This is Anita, what's her face? Oh, crap. Anita Rand? I forget her last name now. Anand. I'll get her name while she talks. Listen to this question, listen to this answer. And we're going to get to the problem, and we're going to get to the national security threat that this poses for America, and make sure everybody understands this. Canada's not just training Chinese soldiers. It's not just harboring Khalistani terrorists. It's not just opening its borders to anybody who wants to come in. Listen to this.
You know, you're fortifying, your government has fortified the border, that you've increased resources. But I do have to put some data to you that challenge the veracity of those points. The first being that there has been a doubling of illegal migration in the last year. That's intercepted on the U.S. side, coming from Canada. That's the statistics from the Border Patrol on the U.S. side. But beyond that, they're also saying that 358 suspects on the terror watch list were arrested on the northern border at ports of entry in the fiscal year 2024, 3 of which were encountered between ports of entry. And by comparison, the number at the Mexico-U.S. border was just 52. Isn't it reasonable that President Trump would raise this concern specifically? And what more beyond what you already are doing are you ready to do?
Well, Vashi, I can present you with statistics as well that support the point that I'm making.
I understand what you just said there. Well, you have your statistics, and I can present you with statistics that confirm my point. That's called cherry picking, you idiot. It's Anita Anand, by the way. I can present you with statistics that prove my point. How about you answer the question as to why there, what was it, 10 times more caught trying to come down from Canada than trying to come up from Mexico? Address that, because that means something. It doesn't mean that the U.S. border is doing a better job on the Canadian side than on the Mexican side, although it might mean that. It might mean that there are just more coming from Canada for whatever the reason. Listen to this.
Which is that we are investing in our border. We are investing in our human resources and surveillance equipment at the border. Immigration officers are, in fact, cracking down with 600% more misrepresentation investigations in 2024 over 2023. We've intercepted human smuggling rings as well, Vashi, and we are seeing progress at...
Okay, so we agree on the same problem. Let's get to why that problem exists, but we won't.
The border in these respects. In addition, we have the Criminal Code of Canada, which is a beacon of the legal system here. We will continue to enforce the criminal code, whether...
We have the criminal code, and yet we also have people on terror watch lists in the country. That's good. It's nice to have something you don't use or enforce. But we'll continue to enforce it. And so whenever these foreigners who are on terror watch lists get brought up by the authorities, we'll throw the book at them and ignore as to how they even got here in the first place.
Whether it's with regards to drugs or other illegal substances. And finally, in terms of immigration, let me say that if you come to Canada illegally, you will be deported. Ooh. And so at all times, it is our sovereign...
How did they get here? Did they get here legally? Did you let hundreds of known people on terror watch lists enter the country legally, Anita? Are we not understanding the problem here? If you come here illegal, you'll be deported. How the hell did so many people on terror watch lists get here in the first place? There's only 2 choices, really.
Right to determine who comes into Canada, what comes into Canada, and we will spare no expense at defending our border, our country, our citizens, and our businesses.
Okay, good. But we're talking about America now. Terrorists or people on terror watch lists are trying to cross into America. What are you doing about that? Look at the reporter's face here. Watch the reporter's face.
Country, our citizens, and our businesses.
This is a I can't believe I had to sit here and not be able to interrupt you for that minute and a half of pure verbal diarrhea.
If that is totally true, then why, like point blank, are there more than 350 people on the terror watch list in our
Canada,
country getting arrested at the American border trying to head into the States? Like on the face...
How many more are there in Canada? Is that all of them? Did they all come into Canada and all of them tried to go to the States, or are there even more in Canada? Is that a fraction of the percent of people on terror watch lists in Canada?
It's like, on the face of it, regardless of the resources that are there already, like, isn't that problematic?
I mean, why is she bouncing? Is she dancing to music that we don't hear, Anita?
As I said,
As I
Vashi,
said.
the relationship between Canada and
As I said, I'm not going to answer the question. That's the problem, people. Nearly 4 million new Canadian residents. By the way, residents is foreigners who are not citizens. Now PM Trudeau forced to slow down immigration. This is 3 weeks ago. This was actually just before the election. He said, we got to slow down immigration after Trump gets elected. Trudeau's got to go all virtue whore yet again. We'll take in all of the illegals who now feel scared from a Trump presidency. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has vowed to significantly reduce the number of new immigrants it allows into the country after acknowledging that his government failed to get the balance right coming out of the pandemic. His administration was criticized for its plan to allow 500,000 new permanent residents into the country in each of the next 2 years. Last Thursday, the Prime Minister said next year's target will now be 395,000 new permanent residents, and the figure will drop to 380,000 in 2020. It'll drop year over year. Okay. In the tumultuous times as we emerged from the pandemic, between addressing labor needs and maintaining population growth, we didn't get the balance right. We're all a part of his problem. He was warned of this in the beginning, but it's not him. Immigration is essential for Canada's future. It must be controlled and it must be sustainable. Canada reached 41 million people in April. The population was 37 million in 2019. Holy mother effer, I'm not going to swear. Do you understand, by the way, 90+% of the population growth in Canada came from immigration? We don't need to read the rest of the article. Then he blames corporations. 2021, 90% of Canada's population growth was due to immigration. In 2023, immigration accounted for 98% of Canada's population growth. That mother effer. Do we understand that? The population grew by 10% and it was virtually entirely foreigners. Why? Canadians can't have kids because the cost of living is too expensive. They can't own homes. Why? Because Justin Trudeau hands out abortions like it's Halloween candy. Why? Because Justin Trudeau promotes contraception. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but government should probably stay out of your sex lives. Why? Because Canada promotes euthanasia like it's the next great fad. 4+% of all death in Canada results from euthanasia, medical assistance in dying. So they're killing Canadians. They're making life too expensive to have kids. And then they're importing at a rate of 90+% up to 98% population growth from immigration. That's not population growth. That's a great replacement, whether you like it or not. Call me a racist, you dumb bums. Holy hell. So 4+ million in the last 3 years. Some of them are temporary, and some of them might not want to be leaving all that quickly. The freebies that they get in Canada, kicking out homeless people and veterans from homeless shelters so they can make room for migrants. They don't only do it in New York, people. This is from today. First reading, Canada's 3 million temporary migrants do not appear poised to leave voluntarily. Chronologically, this was from a couple of days ago. Feds expect 4.9 million with expiring visas to voluntarily leave Canada in the next year. That is 5 million people on visas, foreigners on visas in Canada. Do they count? I think they count them in the 41 million. I think they do. With almost 5 million temporary permits expected to expire over the next year, the feds expect them to leave voluntarily. Well, I don't think that's going to happen. So said Immigration Minister Mark Miller, that scumbag, moron, loser. White dude for Harris is what he is, puts on his indigenous quilted cloth face mask during COVID and puts his indigenous name in it because he's a Minister of Indigenous Affairs or something like that. Maybe he changed. Immigration Minister Mark Miller, he said that to the House of, the Commons Immigration Committee when confronted with that number by Conservative MP Tom Kamiec, according to Blacklock's reporter. Blacklock's is the best journalism in Canada, right up there with Rebel News and Mocha Bezirgan and a bunch of others. There are many ways people will leave the country, said Miller. The vast majority will leave voluntarily. That's what is expected. Kamiec countered, your department tabled documents with Parliament that showed 4.9 million visas are going to expire between September 24 and December 2025. How will we know how many of them actually wind up leaving? Miller said the feds would, quote, monitor that carefully. There are many measures within our department to monitor these things. Yeah, the $80 million ArriveCan bullshit app that never worked in the first place that was supposed to cost $80,000. They'll prosecute those under the law. Kamiec then asked how many of the expiring permits belonging to 766,000 foreign students would leave. Are you saying that 100% are expected to leave, or are you going to send the Canada Border Services agencies to chase them down? Miller replied no, added some people actually get renewals, some people get postgraduate work permits. Department of Immigration counted over 1 million foreign students in Canada as of May 3rd. There are increasing number of students making asylum claims because that's what they do. I think with very little hope, said Miller. Whether you like it or not, they are entitled to due process in this country. I don't think you would purport to deny it to them. The Immigration Department in April 24 briefing notice said the number of undocumented foreigners in Canada was as high as 500,000. Undocumented, illegal. The words don't mean anything anymore. It's outrageous. Trudeau's own published documents show there are 4.9 million people here set to leave, said Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. We asked what the plan was to track their departure. We're just going to take people at their word, he says. He admits 2 ISIS terrorists allowed into our country. What's the plan to protect our security and reinstate sovereignty over who is in our country? Yeah, we'll get back to you on that, Pierre. As soon as we figure out what the answer is, we'll get back to you on that. You get the 3 million temporary migrants do not appear poised to leave voluntarily. Top story, only minutes after assuring the House of Commons committee that millions of foreign nationals would be leaving voluntarily, Immigration Minister Mark Miller was confronted by migrant activists saying they would do no such thing. Here's a bigger problem. And it goes back to Anita Anand refusing to answer why. What was it? It was 350 to 50. 8 times as many people on terror watch lists crossing the border from Canada into the United States of America. Listen to this. Brian Lilly, I think he's one of the few legacy media journalists who seems to do a good job every now and again, more often than the others. There is a terrorism problem at the Canada-US border. Numbers shows there are far more terrorist suspects entering the US from Canada than from Mexico. It's a problem. People crossing from Canada. And I think it was a problem that was largely unknown to a great many people. Listen to this. Over the last 3 years, this is back to the Toronto Sun article, 1,155 people on various terror watch lists have been stopped from entering the United States from Canada. That is a big effing problem. I'm not trying to, I don't want to paint it to fear like that Kim Watson turtle from Australia is going to accuse Viva Frei of pandering to the bro market of fear and anxiety. That is a big effing problem. It's a big effing problem because it means that many and more are currently in Canada. How the hell did they get there? I don't know. And they're trying to enter the US, which can become an existential problem, an existential threat in the US coming from Canada. By contrast, the number of people trying to enter the United States from Mexico who were on a terror watch list over the same 3 years totaled just 199. So we're like an eightfold amount. For Canadians to pretend there is no threat that the Americans need to worry about along the Canada-US border is simply not based in reality. That's never stopped people before. It doesn't stop them from being loud, proud, and vocal about it. In terms of both the terrorist threat and an increase in people crossing into the United States from Canada to claim asylum, the Canadian border has become a major concern. Even on the drug front, there is more that needs to be done to deal with this very serious issue. Biden administration may have raised these issues and have asked for cooperation. Donald Trump stated bluntly on Monday night that we need to get our house in order or face the consequences, we being Canada. Quote, as everyone is aware, thousands of people are pouring through Mexico and Canada, bringing crime and drugs at levels never seen before, said the president-elect. January 20th, as one of my many first executive orders, I will sign all necessary documents to charge Mexico and Canada a 25% tariff on all products coming into the United States and its ridiculous open borders, end quote. Some Canadians scoffed at the idea. There are a couple of issues with that, including that if one partner in a relationship says there's a problem, then they should be listened to. And secondly, that the actual facts say there's a problem. According to stats from the U.S. Customs Border Protection Service, in fiscal year 2024, which ended September 30th, there were 358 people on various terror watch lists who tried to enter the United States from Canada. By comparison, it was only 52 from Mexico. That means 87% of the people on the terror watch lists trying to cross land borders into the United States came from Canada, not Mexico. Prior to 2022, the number of people on terror watch lists trying to cross from either country was not far apart. Sometimes Canada was ahead and sometimes Mexico was ahead. Since 2022, which coincides with the Trudeau government dramatically opening up the temporary foreign workers program, international student admissions, and the falling apart of the refugee system, the number of suspected terrorists crossing in from Canada has increased dramatically. Justin Trudeau is a national security threat to America. Period. Full stop. Call it hyperbolic. I call it based in reality. Americans have also seen a huge increase in the number of people coming from Canada illegally, including many who are trying to declare themselves refugees. Between 2022 and 2024, an 82% increase in illegal crossings from Canada. Over the same period, crossings from Mexico saw a 10% decrease in illegal crossings. Monthly crossings from Canada, US, went up, and we got all the rest of this. I was at a policy conference in September at the Woodrow Wilson Center in DC and had a chance to ask well-connected former State Department official in Washington what he thinks of the fentanyl problem is a Mexico problem or a China problem. He said, it's a Canada problem, McKittrick posted. There are ways to tackle these issues to ensure our immigration system is fixed, that terrorist concerns, which are real, are dealt with. Not just real they're real for Canada. It's one thing for Canada to suffer horrendous consequences of the awful policies of its awful, disgusting, crap-face, blackface Justin Trudeau government. It's another thing for America to have to deal with this crap. So far, there's no evidence Trudeau government wants to engage in that work. We better hope their attitude changes sooner rather than later. National security threat to America. That is what Justin Trudeau is. And now we come full circle back to the beginning, people.
The United
on the U.S. side, but beyond the border,
not answering the question.
Is that we are investing in our border. We are investing in our human resources and surveillance equipment at the border. Immigration.
She bounces her head around as much as Chrystia Freeland.
Officers are in fact cracking.
She's reading notes.
Down with 600% more misrepresentation investigations in 2024 over 2023.
You get the idea, people. Justin Trudeau, that failed drama teacher, failed prime minister, whose father apparently had sexual relations with a 10-year-old. If you haven't seen the Patrick Bet-David podcast, go watch it. That failure of a human, of a moral, spiritual person, that failure is endangering all of America. And that is not hyperbolic.